My boyfriend told his friends I was just something to do until he finds better, not realizing I was standing behind him, holding the birthday gift I spent weeks planning. And when he— Hi Reddit. I'm 22F, and this all unfolded a few weeks ago. I've been sitting with it for a while, trying to make sense of things, trying not to let the whole thing eat me alive. I'm not the type to post about my personal life online, but I honestly just need to put this somewhere. Somewhere it won't echo back at me with fake sympathy or vague advice about letting it go. So, here's what happened, or rather, how it all started to unravel. I met Miles, 23M, during the spring of my freshman year at university. It was one of those warm evenings when the campus still buzzes after sundown, and people sit out on the grass just to feel alive. There was a student film screening outside the library, and I ended up sitting near him by accident. Or maybe not by accident. He always claimed I caught his eye right away. We started talking over some indie film neither of us really understood, and the conversation just kept going. He had this quiet confidence that pulled me in, like he didn't need to try too hard. I remember thinking he was the kind of guy who didn't mind silences. He just knew how to fill them when it mattered. We started dating not long after that, and before I knew it, we were doing the whole study together, crash at each other's place, talk about dreams at 2 a.m. thing. It felt real, solid. Over the years, we had our ups and downs, who doesn't? But I always believed in us. Even when things got tense, like when he started skipping classes junior year or when he dismissed my plans to apply for internships out of state. I figured he just needed more time to figure himself out. He always told me I was the stable one and that he admired how focused I was. I wore that like a badge of honor. After graduation, I landed a job in digital marketing. It wasn't my dream role, but it paid the bills and gave me room to grow. Miles, meanwhile, was trying. Or so he said. He picked up a few gigs here and there tutoring, dog walking, helping his uncle with web design, but nothing consistent. He was still living in the same shared apartment near campus, still sleeping until noon most days. I supported him emotionally, financially when needed, and always told myself this was temporary. He was talented, thoughtful, charming when he wanted to be. I figured his drive would catch up eventually. Then came his birthday. Miles doesn't like big gestures, so I tried to make the day meaningful instead of flashy. A few months earlier, we'd walked by this little vintage music shop, and he stopped dead in his tracks at the sight of a weathered, sunburst Les Paul guitar in the window. He said it looked just like the one his dad used to play before he passed. It was a throwaway comment, but something in his voice stuck with me. He never brought it up again, and I doubt he thought I remembered. But I did. I couldn't afford that exact guitar. It was way out of budget, but I spent weeks scouring forums and second-hand sites until I found one with the same model and look. It had a few nicks on the side, but nothing I couldn't fix with some polish and patience. I even reached out to a friend who worked at a music store to make sure I tuned it right. I wanted the reveal to be perfect, not flashy, just thoughtful. I planned everything. A cozy dinner reservation at his favorite jazz bar, a small gathering of friends afterward at his place, and a handwritten note tucked inside the guitar case. I'd imagined his face when he opened it. The surprised laugh, the way he always ran his fingers through his hair when he got emotional. I thought about that moment for days. The night before his birthday, I realized I had left my phone charger at his place. It wasn't urgent, but I figured I'd swing by since I was nearby picking up the cake I'd ordered. I also thought I could quietly leave the guitar behind his couch so he'd find it when he woke up. Something about that felt sweeter than handing it to him in person. When I got there, his roommate, Troy, opened the door and greeted me like usual. He didn't think twice about letting me in. Miles and I were close enough that I'd come by all the time. Troy told me the guys were out back on the patio, having a drink. I nodded, thanked him, and made my way through the apartment. That's when I heard them talking. I was about halfway through the kitchen when I caught Miles' voice drifting through the open patio door. He was mid-sentence, laughing in that slightly smug way he did when he felt clever. "She's sweet, but let's be real. I'm not marrying her or anything," he said, like it was the most casual thing in the world. I stopped cold. At first, I thought maybe I misheard. Or maybe he was talking about someone else. Then another voice chimed in, Caleb, I think. Dude, that's cold. Miles laughed again. I mean, she's fine. She's low maintenance. Doesn't complain. Just kinda there, you know? Something to do until I figure things out, or until something better comes along. The room spun a little. I didn't move. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the handle of the guitar case. The weight of it suddenly felt unbearable, like it was filled with cement and shame. I stood there, just out of sight, listening to him describe me like I was a background character in his life. Like I was a placeholder. Something to do. I think one of the other guys said something after that, maybe to change the subject, maybe to keep it going, but I didn't hear it. I turned around and left as quietly as I could. Didn't say a word to Troy. Didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for a while after I left his place. I didn't even know where I was going, just turned down random streets, windows cracked, music off. I didn't cry, not right away. It was like my body hadn't caught up to my brain yet. I just felt hollow. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just tired. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long and only now realized it wasn't mine to carry. Eventually, I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, one of those places that always smells like burnt coffee and pancakes. I sat in my car for maybe half an hour before going in. I didn't even order anything. Just slid into a booth in the corner and stared out the window, the guitar still sitting in my trunk, like a joke that wasn't funny anymore. The worst part wasn't even the words. Not exactly. It was how easily they came out of his mouth. How he said it with a laugh, like I was some kind of inside joke. Like our relationship was just this convenience he'd stumbled into. Something to fill the time. And all that time I'd spent trying to be understanding, trying to make things easier for him, thinking I was being patient, supportive. All of it now looked like quiet permission for him to treat me like I didn't matter. I didn't sleep that night. I called in sick the next day and stayed home, alternating between lying in bed and pacing the apartment. I kept opening the notes app on my phone, trying to write out what I wanted to say to him. Not for closure. Not even for confrontation. Just something to organize the storm in my head. But every time I started typing, I'd get this knot in my throat and slam it shut. By mid-afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Text from Miles. A few from his friends. I didn't read most of them, but I did catch a glimpse of one preview on my lock screen. Hey, you left last night? Everything okay? That hit me sideways. Everything okay. Like he hadn't said anything. Like it was just a normal night and I had slipped out because I was tired or forgot something. That was the moment it really sank in. He had no idea I heard him. None. I could have ghosted him, blocked him, and been done with it. But after everything I'd poured into that relationship, the idea of letting it all quietly disappear felt too easy for him. He'd just move on. Say I was dramatic. Say we drifted. No, I wasn't going to burn everything down just yet, but I wasn't going to disappear either. I spent the next day planning. Not in a vindictive movie villain way, just methodically, calmly, like sorting laundry. I returned the reservation at the jazz bar, got a partial refund. Thankfully, I donated the guitar to a local music youth program. The card? I burned it in the sink and watched the words curl into ash. Then I took a long shower, changed into a clean outfit, and went to the birthday dinner. Yup, I still went. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. I needed to see him. Not to beg for answers or hear some hollow excuse. I just wanted to look him in the eye knowing what I knew. I wanted to see if there was even a flicker of guilt. And, okay, maybe a part of me wanted him to see that I wasn't unraveling. That I could still show up, hold my head high, and walk out on my own terms. The dinner was at this low-key Italian place downtown. Cozy booths, warm lighting, the smell of garlic everywhere. I showed up right on time. He was already there, surrounded by a few of his friends, laughing, arms draped over the back of the booth like he owned the place. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. That same smile he always gave me, like nothing had changed. Hey, you, he said, standing to hug me. You okay? You left kind of quick last night. I hugged him back. Briefly. He didn't notice how stiff I was. Or maybe you did and didn't care. Yeah, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. Just tired. He didn't bring it up again. We ordered food. He talked about some new job lead, joked with his friends, nudged me under the table when the waiter got his name wrong. It was surreal, sitting across from him, knowing what I knew, pretending for the sake of everyone else that we were still us. At one point, Caleb showed up and slid into the booth next to Miles. I watched him carefully. He didn't look at me any differently. Didn't act weird or awkward. Just nodded a hello and reached for the bread basket. I waited for a sign, some crack in the surface. Nothing. These guys were used to covering for each other. It was second nature. But the thing is, I wasn't. So when dessert came, some giant slice of tiramisu with a candle sticking out, I smiled politely, wished him happy birthday, and handed him a plain white envelope. He opened it, eyebrows raised, expecting something inside. A gift card, maybe. A ticket to something. Inside was a printed photo of the guitar, sitting on a bench with a little note next to it. Thought this might have been meaningful. Changed my mind. Donated it instead. Happy birthday. He looked at it, confused, then glanced up at me. What's this? That, I said, finishing the last bite of my pasta, was supposed to be your gift. The table got quiet. Caleb glanced over, confused, but I didn't look at either of them. And why'd you change your mind? Miles asked, trying to laugh it off, but his voice had tightened just enough. I met his eyes, finally. You said I was just something to do. I didn't think you needed a gift from someone who's just killing time. And then I stood up, smoothed out my coat, and walked out. I walked to my car slowly, trying to hold myself together. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't pinpoint if it was from the adrenaline of what I just said or from the sense of finality that came with it. I wasn't angry, not really. I wasn't looking to break anything or turn the tables in a dramatic fashion. I just needed to walk away. I needed him to understand, at least on some level, that I wasn't some placeholder. But the text that buzzed on my phone as I unlocked the door to my car shifted everything. It wasn't from Miles. It was from his sister, Zoe. Zoe had always been complicated. She wasn't exactly the baby of the family, but she was definitely the one who always got away with things. She wasn't cruel, but she wasn't someone I could trust, either. She and I had spent some time together, mostly during holidays or when I'd been at Miles' place. But there was always an underlying tension, like she was sizing me up without saying anything outright. I knew she didn't like how much Miles leaned on me, how much she saw how much I'd done for him. And to be honest, she didn't hide it well. The message from her was short and to the point. You should know something. Miles isn't what you think he is. He's always been this way. Don't think you're the first one. I stared at the message, my pulse picking up again. It was vague. It didn't make sense. But Zoe didn't usually send me messages like this unless she was trying to say something without saying it. I didn't want to read too much into it, but the words hung there in the air between us like an invitation. I took a deep breath, and instead of responding immediately, I just sat in my car for a moment. My mind raced, replaying every moment with him. All those quiet moments where I'd caught him lying about little things, or when I'd found him hiding behind his half-hearted attempts to explain why he couldn't take anything seriously. I brushed them off, because I thought he was just figuring things out. I thought I could wait. But now, I wasn't so sure. I couldn't just let this slide. Not anymore. I wasn't looking for petty revenge or something impulsive. But I knew I needed to do something. Something quiet. Something calculated. I had to make sure Miles understood the cost of his carelessness. Not just with me, but with everything. The way he treated people. The way he used them. So I set the phone down and started thinking. Not about what would hurt him the most emotionally. That wasn't the point. I needed him to see his own complacency, his own lack of direction. I needed him to realize how deeply I'd been involved in his life, and how little he truly respected me in return. I texted Zoe back after a few minutes, trying to sound calm but purposeful. What are you talking about? If you're trying to warn me, I need more than vague hints. Be straight with me, Zoe. I let it sit there for a while, unsure if I'd get a response. I didn't want to chase answers from someone who had been on the sidelines, but I had no choice. I needed to know what she was hinting at. Because that little message was my window into everything I'd suspected but never fully confronted. While I waited, I started making my own plans. First thing on my list was to get my personal things out of Miles' apartment. I wasn't interested in leaving anything behind that might let him think I was still clinging to something that wasn't real. No half-sentimental trinkets, no leftover clothes. I didn't want him to have anything that could potentially feed his ego after all this. So I made a list of things that I knew I could pick up while he was at work. Clothes, a few books, and, honestly, I wanted to get my key back. Because, yes, he'd let me have one at some point. It wasn't just about the physical things, though. It was about severing ties on my terms, not his. But it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the fact that, by staying in the background for so long, I'd become complicit in a dynamic that wasn't working for either of us. And I knew it wasn't just me who'd been fooled by him. There were other people he'd lied to, other people who had invested time and energy into helping him, thinking he was going to step up. I wasn't going to be the only one to see the truth. I'd never thought of myself as the type to play games or orchestrate elaborate payback schemes. But after hearing that message from Zoe, I couldn't just let this go. I started considering how to take some of the attention away from the comfortable little world Miles had built for himself. If he wanted to see what consequences really felt like, I'd show him. I wasn't planning on burning bridges or playing a toxic game. I wanted him to feel uncomfortable, to feel how much I'd given without being seen. I wanted him to look around and finally ask himself why no one ever stuck around for long. I wanted to take away the crutch he'd been using for years, his ability to glide by on charm and manipulation without really working for anything. The first step? Exposing some of the things I knew about him. And I didn't mean gossip. I meant the real stuff. The things that would wake him up to the fact that there were people who'd been silently watching him waste his potential. That he wasn't just finding himself, he was stalling. And the thing about stalling is that eventually, time runs out. It wasn't going to be a huge public spectacle, though. That wasn't my style. It was going to be slow, almost imperceptible, like chipping away at the edges of his comfortable world. And then Zoe replied, "I don't want to get involved, but I've seen how he treats you. He'll never change. You deserve more than what he gives you." I read that message inside. It wasn't a direct admission of anything, but I could tell that Zoe was warning me in her own way, almost like she was regretting not speaking up sooner. I could work with that. I took a breath and sat back in the car, looking at the message Zoe had sent. There was something in the way she said it, something almost resigned about her tone, that made me realize I wasn't the first person he'd let down. She knew what he was like, and it was clear she had been waiting for me to figure it out for myself. That moment shifted everything. It wasn't just about Miles anymore. It wasn't just about getting my stuff back or having a conversation about why I was hurt. This was about understanding the pattern. The same way he had treated me was how he had treated others. He took and took, and when there was nothing left, he just moved on without looking back. I made a decision. The next day, I went to his apartment. He wasn't home, which worked out perfectly. I packed up all my things, the clothes, books, and things that had been mine. I didn't take much. I didn't need reminders of someone who had never truly been present. I left the key on his kitchen counter with a note that simply said, "I'm done. I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. But then something surprising happened. I didn't hear from Miles right away, and to be honest, I didn't care at first. A few days went by, and I went through the motions: work, errands, making plans with friends. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt relieved. Like a weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally lifted. And then, on the fifth day, I got a message from Zoe again. "I think Miles finally gets it. He's been texting me nonstop. I don't think he realized how much he pushed you away." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't looking for an apology or some grand gesture. The truth was, I'd moved on. I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses or trying to fix what had already been broken. But a few days later, he called. I debated answering, but in the end, I picked up. "Hey," he said, his voice sounding tired. "I just wanted to talk. To apologize for how I've treated you." I didn't cut him off. I didn't yell. I just listened. He went on about how he had been self-centered, how he realized he'd been taking me for granted, how he hadn't seen it at the time, but now he understood the impact of what he'd done. I'd heard this story before from him, but this time it felt different. Maybe because I wasn't waiting for him to change. Maybe because I didn't need him to. I don't want your apology, I said calmly. You can't keep apologizing for things you've already done. You've shown me who you are, Miles. And I'm done letting you treat me like I'm nothing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. So that's it. That's it, I replied. I gave you a chance, and I'm not going to keep pretending. He said a few more things, mostly trying to explain himself, but by that point, I wasn't listening. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew exactly what had happened. I knew that the time I spent trying to fix him had been wasted. I didn't need his closure. I had mine. After that call, I didn't hear from him again. He never tried to reach out through friends or family. It felt like a finality I hadn't expected to feel. It was quiet, but it was peaceful. Zoe did reach out a couple of weeks later, though. We had a brief conversation, and she told me that Miles was a mess. He'd been apologizing to everyone and trying to piece his life back together, but she admitted something that struck me. He'll never change until he learns that it's not just about him. It wasn't a vindictive statement. Zoe wasn't gloating. She was just tired, and I could tell that she had been waiting for him to come to terms with his own behavior for a long time. That's where things ended with Miles. He faded from my life without much fanfare, without any grand gestures, but that was okay. I didn't need the drama. I didn't need a big confrontation or some dramatic apology. The peace I had found from walking away was worth more than anything he could have said or done. As for me, I focused on myself. I spent time rediscovering the things I had put on hold, the things I had pushed aside while I was trying to make a relationship work that never had the right foundation. I started saying yes to things that made me happy, things that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. I eventually got the chance to take a trip to a place I'd always wanted to visit. It was something I'd been talking about for years but had always put off. But this time, I went. Alone. And it was exactly what I needed, a reminder that I had control over my own happiness, and I didn't need to rely on someone else to feel complete. I don't know what happened to Miles after that. Zoe told me he was trying to work on himself, but part of me didn't care. I wasn't there to witness it, and honestly, that was for him to figure out. I knew I had made the right choice, and that was enough. As for Zoe, we ended up keeping in touch a little. Not like we were best friends, but she seemed to respect the way I'd handled things. And maybe, just maybe, it made her look at things a little differently in her own life. At the end of the day, I realized that the revenge wasn't about any grand act or dramatic confrontation. It wasn't about watching Miles squirm. It was about finding my own peace. And in that quiet space, I found a new kind of strength. That was all the closure I needed.